Hello and welcome to Life Beyond the Numbers, the podcast for those curious about creating a more fulfilling work life. Every business boils down to two basics: people and money. Here we focus on the human side. Numbers matter, but people matter most, and people drive performance. I'm Susan Nichriadon, your host, a coach, consultant, facilitator, and author of Leading Beyond the Numbers. It brings me joy to speak to people and explore together how, although we share many similarities as humans, each of us navigates the world through our own unique lens. This adds intricacy to our interactions and contributes to both the depth and difficulties of interpersonal relationships. Join us for stories, strategies, and insights to help you lead your life beyond the numbers. Well, today it is a great pleasure to have Alexander Inchbald on Life Beyond the Numbers. It's funny, in the lead up to this, I was thinking, how come we haven't had a conversation on this podcast before? Who knows? But here we are, better late than never. Alexander, you're so welcome.
Thank you so much, Susan. It's a pleasure to be here. I'm overjoyed to be here, having been involved so much with what you're doing with the book, and just a pleasure to be here and to see what's happened to the book and to see what's happened to your business.
Yeah, thank you. There are so many things from previous conversations that have stayed with me that you've talked about, and sometimes it's through the words of others. And one particular phrase that you use that I like to hold with me all the time now is, I see the light within you as you see the light within me. So maybe we could start there, Alexander, and you could talk a little bit about what seeing the light means.
So the phrase is an esoteric greeting, and I was introduced to it by a mentor, a guy called Vernon Frost, who is one of a handful of esoteric teachers in the world. And this is an esoteric greeting. I see the light within you as you see the light within me. And I'm grateful for sharing this time and space in love with you. And when you look into somebody's eyes, you see a light. Even if it's dimmed, even if it looks like it's gone out, it hasn't. The light hasn't gone out. The light can't go out. If the light goes out, you're dead. And we know what that's like. Most of us have seen a dead body. And that famous experiment of 21 grams, that there's something missing. What is that? Well, we can speculate. We can give it a label. We can call it a soul or energy or spirit. But really the label misses the point. There is a pilot light running in all of us. And to me, that pilot light is the artist inside us. It's that creative spark within us. It's the essence of who we are. And we know when we see a dead body, that spark is no longer there. It's gone out or it's left. Because if you look at an entire system, that this whole idea in science that there's something called entropy, that things go from high to low, that I have a phone here and that the battery on the phone goes down, or I have a battery in my car and the battery in the car goes down, goes from high to low. That's the theory of entropy. And the theory that the light goes out within us is based on the theory of entropy, that it will go out, that a fire burns out. But actually, where does that energy go? Where does that light go? Does it go out or does it leave? Does it go somewhere else? And according to various traditions, esoteric traditions which have been around for thousands and thousands of years, the light doesn't go out. It just moves into another dimension where you can't see it. So what does it mean to see the light? It means to see the essence, that essence beyond form, beyond the physical, beyond the material, the artist inside us that lights up everything beyond the numbers.
Beyond. And I think what strikes me most from that is you use the word creative or artist as being the representation, perhaps, of our essence. And I don't know that everyone would think of it like that or see that their soul perhaps is their creative spark or their artist. So, what brought you to that?
Well, first of all, painting, painting in the mountains and having mystical experiences really, where I started to see things that I couldn't explain. With Newtonian science, you just can't explain why, when you get into a certain state, things happen. Painting in a blizzard, for instance, to start with, fighting the blizzard, the ego fighting the blizzard. Why is the paint running off the canvas? Why can I not control it? My friend is here filming me. It's this beautiful scene, and what I really wanted to paint in the snow just outside Geneva, this beautiful avenue of trees, and we're in the midst of a blizzard, and I have no control. And it's a little bit of like what happens in business today. Change happens, and we're like, how do I respond to this change? I'm out of control. I don't know what to do. And we get more and more frustrated when that happens. And then at a certain point, just kind of letting go. And we hear this word surrender a lot in esoteric circles. What does surrender really mean? It doesn't mean wave the white flag. That's not what it is. It's to let go of the resistance, because resistance creates more resistance. So when we let go of the resistance and we embrace the storm, the change, actually we realize that that force wants to partner with us. It's there to teach us something, in this case, to let go of the resistance to it. And in the moment that I let go in the middle of this blizzard, the snow, I realized, was actually helping to create incredible patterns on the paint. And so as I observed it, like this incredible painting emerged in front of me, this extraordinarily beautiful piece of art. And I was mesmerized by what was happening. Yeah, I was still holding the brush. But then the question comes, who's painting? It's certainly not my ego. So who is it? The light within me, the spark within me, the wave? But the wave is connected to the ocean. So who is really painting? And true surrender, true freedom, is to become the empty vessel through which the greater part of us, the greatest part of us, can flow. It's just an empty vessel through which something can be created. So that's the experience of painting. And we can see that in different artists. Some artists truly became the empty vessel and created masterpiece after masterpiece and had impact in their lifetime, a material impact in their lifetime. And this to me is really important. So when you talk about beyond the numbers, yes, we have to go beyond the numbers in order to tap into that light, but the numbers matter. So it's not just we're going to disappear into ourselves and have no impact. So if you were to compare two artists, you would take Michelangelo and Vincent van Gogh. Michelangelo painted the Sistine Chapel at the age of 24. He created David at the age of 20. He was creating art from the age of 16, and he created it all the way through to the age of 84. And he took on big commissions. We're recording this a few days after the Pope's funeral. And he worked with 8 different popes. So they were literally falling like flies. If you do the sums, he first worked with the Pope at the age of 24, and 60 years later, he'd worked with 8 different popes. So they're literally just going. And he's working on big commissions. So he's getting funded. And you compare that to Vincent van Gogh. Vincent, he dies at the age of 37. He only really paints masterpieces for 2 years. He wanted to paint at the age of 16, but his father said no. So one of them is trying to climb up the mountain and by creating masterpieces to find peace. It's like you're struggling up the mountain to find a state of peace, to find the light inside you. The other is operating from the top of the mountain. This person died and only sold 2 paintings, both to his brother. This person created masterpieces from the age of 20 to the age of 84. So which type of artist are you? You're the artist who's coming from the light, coming from the essence, coming from the soul, coming from the spirit, knowing that you can have impact, knowing that you can be paid well, get decent commissions for that, knowing that you can have incredible relationships, knowing that you can be in fine health. Or are you the artist who's addicted to the process of creation to try and find a state of peace, but actually dies alone, poor, never has relationships, is in poor health? But which artist are you? Which artist do you choose to be?
And I think there's a third. There's one that hasn't yet thought of their creative spark. They've gone into a life that they went through school, university, perhaps into the workplace and into a job,
Yes.
and that they put in the hours. Yes, and maybe something outside of work has a creative spark, perhaps something inside has a creative spark, but have they truly connected to that? Even if they're going to go the Michelangelo or the Van Gogh route.
Yeah. Well, Pablo Picasso said, every child is born an artist. The challenge is remaining one growing up. And if you look at artists like William Wordsworth, he would say in Ode to Immortality, heaven trails behind us at our birth. And so we come into this world. You look at esoteric teachers, you look at masters, but pretty much every tradition will tell you that you come in with that energy. And you come in whole, you come in with such love. And when we come into this world, we come in with love. And yet you look at a baby, and a baby is not necessarily beautiful, but we say, oh, isn't the baby beautiful? Why do we say that? The baby can be bruised and battered through the birthing process. The head literally is squeezed in order to get through the birthing canal. And so the baby comes out and we're like, oh, isn't it beautiful? No, physically it's not often. So why do we say the baby's beautiful? Because the baby comes in with that incredible energy. So yes, we are born with that spark. And if the spark goes out completely, we're dead, because it's the spark of life, it's the light of life. So what happens? Well, Wordsworth writes about it. He says that the shades of the prison cell fall around the growing boy, around the age of 7. So the ego starts to form, and we have a series of experiences which start to shape who we become. So we come from all of this, connecting to all of this, the ocean, we move to becoming a wave. And then what happened with me and what happened with Vincent and also what happened with Michelangelo, it's interesting. The age of 16, for all three of us, our father came to us and said, you'll never make money as a professional artist. Vincent goes, oh, you're right. Goes off for 10 years and tries to find another way. He becomes a teacher. He trains to become a priest. He goes and works in the mines in Belgium, and then eventually goes and seeks haven at his brother's apartment in Paris. And then he starts painting, and then he goes down to the south of France and he produces his masterpieces. And yes, he was painting a little bit in Holland before that, but basically it was in Paris and Provence. What does Michelangelo do? Michelangelo, at the age of 16, his father says, no, you're not going to make any money as a professional artist. And he goes straight back to Ghirlandaio's workshop, atelier, and he paints. He comes home, his father beats him, and he goes back to the atelier. And this keeps on going. So what happened is he kept that spark not only alive, but he kept it vibrant, and he continued to create from that spark. So there was never any pause. Now, let's be clear, that takes incredible courage. And what most of us do is, it may not be our father, And it may not be about painting because that's not the main modality today, but it's about creativity and it's about the artist inside us. And to me, Steve Jobs is an artist, one of the greatest artists that we've seen in the last 50 years. He created this thing, he created the thing that I'm talking to you on right now. And that to me is art because he taps into that essence inside himself and he creates something that may not have been the nicest guy in the world, may have been a bully. We've seen other entrepreneurs in the world today who are incredible artists, but also bullies. And we may not like their personality, but they do seem to be able to tap into this spark. So the spark is still there. What happens is we suppress it. And this is where, for me, Sir Ken Robinson is wrong, because in the world's most popular TED Talk, the title is, Do Schools Kill Creativity? Now, that title was given to him by TED. He didn't actually come up with it himself. But it is misleading because it implies that schools do kill creativity, and they can't. Because if they did, you'd be dead. The spark's still there. The pilot light's still running. It's just suppressed like it was with Vincent van Gogh. Now, my story, my father said the same thing, age 16. Exactly when Dead Poets Society came out. And I didn't stand up on the table and say, Captain, my captain. I didn't stand up to my father and say, no, I'm an artist like Michelangelo. I stopped painting for 14 years. And I had eating problems and drinking problems, ended up in hospital twice. I got made redundant from my first job. And it wasn't until I went on my first self-development program that I started to unlock this light again and allow this light to express itself.
Dead Poets Society, for a moment, I'm back myself as a teenager. I mean, it was such a powerful movie, so powerful. And I remember coming home and hugging my parents so tightly because I did not feel like that, luckily. I was given great freedom around expression and everything. So I suppose, can our creativity then come out in different ways? Because when I would look at myself, numbers and maybe that's why I've gone beyond numbers as well, but numbers were and still are to some extent my creativity, my fun, my play, my sense of flow, everything I can get being with the numbers. But now it's much more the words side of things that have really sparked for me. And I wonder, I suppose we have a narrow view, maybe that's what I'm getting to, of what creativity is for people and within organizations. And we see it often as performative, as opposed to what you're saying is like it's the fuel, effectively. It's a catalyst to so much, and yet it's an underutilized resource in the world today.
Yes. And there are multiple different ways through which we can express our creativity. So one of the tools that we use is called the artist profile. And the origins of the artist profile go all the way back to the I Ching, which is a 5,000-year-old Chinese book, the subtitle, The Book of Changes. And when you look at, I've forgotten his name for a moment, the psychologist,
Flo, Mikhail, no?
Carl Jung. So Carl
Oh,
Jung
Carl Jung, yeah.
took the I Ching and he used it to develop the first version of the archetypes. And the archetypes then came into business as things like Myers-Briggs and Gallup Strength Finder and things like that. But what Carl Jung understood and Myers-Briggs removed and Gallup Strength Finder removed was the essence. It actually removed the spark. It removed that light at the heart of the I Ching. At the center of the I Ching is the illuminating presence. It's the creative, it's the artist inside us. And that spark can then be used in multiple different ways. And all of us have a tendency to create in one or more of these different ways. So the artist profile identifies 4 different types. The creator who creates ideas, the kind of classic artist, if you like, who's constantly creating. I've already mentioned Vincent, but if you think about Robin Williams, who was the lead actor in the Poets Society, Robin Williams was very similar to Vincent in the sense that he was trying to get to peace. He wasn't coming from peace. He was trying to get to peace, which is why he died so young, and why so many creators who only stay creators die young, because they're using that creation as an avoidance of the moment that they're not creating. So it is a form of art, but it is a form of avoidance of the lack of peace. And we see many people like that, just creating. So there's nothing wrong with being a creator, but if you don't balance it with some of the other profiles, you'll never come from peace, because actually you can access all of them, no matter what your upbringing. So the second one is what we refer to as the collaborator. And if this is spring energy, this is about ideas, this is about new growth, new birth, then summer energy is about connecting that out to communities. So many of us have the capacity to collaborate and create communities who get excited about the ideas. Now, often we find that more as a salesperson or a partnership person or a networking person. And you can always tell somebody who leads as a collaborator because they have a big group of friends. You know, they have a big community. They're always having parties. They're always the life and the soul of the party. You know when they walk into the room. Maybe that's you. The third type is what we refer to as the cultivator. So the cultivator, think of a garden, you're cultivating the garden. So we've got something growing, we've got something blossoming in summer and being pollinated. And then in autumn, we're harvesting it. And the cultivator knows exactly the right timing to do it. It's like, I know this is the right time. And often we find that cultivators are very good with numbers. They're very good at this is the right time or this is the right time. It's an art. If I look that way, I look over the UNESCO vineyards in Switzerland, these vineyards which tumble into Lake Geneva. And the best vigneron, so the owners of the vineyards, they know exactly the right time when to harvest that grape. That's an art. But that harvest has a direct impact on the quality of the wine, therefore the price of the wine, therefore the profit that they can make. So this is an art, knowing when to time it correctly. And then the final type is what we refer to as the choreographer. And the choreographer tends to be behind the stage, designing what goes on the stage. Can observe how the actors need to play the correct roles, what role they need to play. Now, if you go back to Michelangelo, he not only created, but he also worked with 8 different popes. He also died with 2,000 gold florins in a chest in his room and houses that he owned in Florence and Rome. And he was able to coordinate 60 people to cut a slab of marble out of the rock in order to create the statue of David. In other words, he mastered all 4 of these different profiles. So come back to the subtext of the I Ching, the Book of Changes. Myers-Briggs will tell you that you are one type. Myers-Briggs is slightly more complex. There's 16 different types, but it will say you're that type. It's fixed. Well, I did Myers-Briggs when I was at Unilever at the age of 25, and I was ESTJ. I did it a few months ago, and I'm INFP. In other words, if you know your Myers-Briggs, that's 180 degrees different. A solely Myers-Briggs trained practitioner, I don't believe there is one, but a solely trained Myers-Briggs practitioner will tell you, well, you did it wrong when you were 25. No, I didn't do it wrong when I was 25. It misunderstands the fact that we change, we evolve, and we can grow, and we can actually reclaim this wholeness. We can actually expand. Look at you. You've gone from being an artist with numbers to being an artist with words, to being an artist that coordinates the publication of a book, to an artist with ideas. Now, that is mastery, not the avoidance of all of these other things because we can't find peace, but actually coming from peace. And when we come from peace, when we come from wealth, when we come from health, when we come from love, then everything changes in our world. And remember, that's where we came from. So it's not like we're trying to get somewhere. That's an illusion. It's a delusion of the ego that you've actually forgotten who you are. You are that. Wordsworth was right. Picasso was right.
And I see that more and more myself, or I understand that more and more in myself, that I don't have to look for calmness or peace. I don't have to find these things, my voice, whatever it might be. They're already here.
Yeah.
They're absolutely already here. I love the imagery of the UNESCO vineyards, and not so much an imagery because it's real, it's there in front of you, and I know exactly where you are, and I've walked through that many a time, but also that beauty of planting at the right time, reaping at the right time, setting the prices, the quality, all of that stuff, making money so that you can do it again and look after yourself. And it makes me think, Alexander, about the state of the world right now
Mm.
and the stage. I mean, you talked about the stage, and if we look at the world stage at the moment, who do we have? Collaborators, cultivators, choreographers, what's going on? And I was thinking about the timing in particular of a lot of the financial turmoil that has come about recently. And I know neither of us are experts in any of this as such, but it's interesting, like, was that a mistiming? Or is it just part of where we're going? I don't know if you have the answers, but it's interesting to go into this with you.
Yeah. So let's take the tariffs, right? It's the most obvious one right now, but we could
The
also
most beautiful word in the English language, apparently.
well, we could look at the story of how that came about. We could also look at why is USAID being closed down? Why have we looked at efficiency in government? And there is some truth here. And the truth is that government is inefficient. The truth is that it was designed for a different age and it is not kept up to speed in the same way that a company which is publicly registered on the stock exchange must deliver to shareholders on a daily basis. But rather than blame our governments for this, let's be clear, we are the shareholders of our countries. So if we're the shareholders of our countries, then it is down to each and every one of us to hold our government accountable for what they're doing and to become indifferent to it, to become laissez-faire and just ignore it. That is our responsibility. And so the shift that we see at the moment, the big shift, whether you look at the aid sector, development sector, or you look at business, is a shift from a dependence model to a independence or consciously dependence model. Take aid. And aid is a codependent model. Because what happens is governments in emerging and developing economies, they look at the NGOs and governments around the world and they say, oh, well, they'll fill that gap. So we don't have to. And what the aid agencies and governments do, they go, well, we did something wrong. We were bad. We were wrong. And that's true. I grew up in a country where if you were to be nice, the sun never set on the empire.
Yes.
That was the nice phrase. But let's be really clear. Concentration camps did not come from Nazi Germany. They came from the Boer War, the British incarcerating prisoners of war in concentration camps. 10 million people died in India through negligence, British negligence. So I'm not here to point fingers at others. The first place to look at is actually inside ourselves. Where is our responsibility? And the shift we're seeing at the moment is the shift from feeling guilty and trying to make reparations to self-resilience. I was in Kenya many years ago doing some work around water and clean water and
sanitation and hygiene. Yeah.
And in fact, I'm doing a fundraising piece at the moment for the WASH cluster, which is hosted by UNICEF. And they have a $2 billion problem a year and trying to bridge that gap. And what we see in the aid sector is that there is a over dependence on that funding. And yet when you speak to individuals on the ground, as I did 10, 15 years ago, I remember this one guy, smart young guy, he said, we don't want handouts. We just want a level playing field. That's what we want. In other words, pointing towards self-resilience. But the whole system is set up to create dependence. So what is the shift that we're going through? Is the shift from dependence to self-resilience, to sovereignty. And sovereignty requires us to look inside ourselves. But let's then look at some of the policies which have been put in place. You don't move to sovereignty or self-resilience by pulling the plug. If you take what happened when DFID, so the Department of Foreign Investment and Development in the UK, they merged it with the Foreign Office, the Foreign and Commonwealth Office, and they shifted it from it being the FCO to the FCDO. In other words, they merged the two together. They took 2 years to do it, 3 years to do it, something like that. It was proposed under Boris Johnson, and it was finalized only really last year, was it finalized? So what is that, 3, 4 years that it's taken to implement that? In other words, they went through a slow transition to integrate these two together. And yes, aid has been politicized. What's happened with the new administration is it's gone bang, so fast that it's pulled the plug on millions of people's jobs and created incredible disruption. Same thing with tariffs. Now, where did tariffs come from? Tariffs came out of, according to one report I read, it was CNN or NBC or somebody, that the current president's son was asked, I think it was the previous administration, so the first administration, to see if he could find an economist who could back up the idea of going after tariffs. And he came across this book, which was basically about making America great again. And the author quoted an economist. It turns out the economist didn't exist. And so I'd have to find this report. Now, the problem with this, right, is there's hearsay in here. Like, I don't know whether this story is true or not, that the economist was made up. The point is that there is a story here, and I'm telling one side of the story. There is another side of the story. And the danger is that in telling stories, and I could embellish this story and make it very powerful, I make myself right and the other side wrong. And as soon as you do that, you trigger shame. And if you trigger shame, you will trigger one of two things: the suppression of the light that we talked about earlier, or the desire to get revenge. So what are we really seeing here going on? It's not about the tariffs. It's not about shutting down USAID. It's not about firing millions of people. It's about a reaction to being told that you were wrong. And as my friend Masaki, who you've met, my Japanese partner, pointed out in an amazing conversation I had with him the other day, he said, you grew up in a monotheistic world. I grew up in a polytheistic world. I had to remember what monotheism and polytheism was, right? So monotheism is the belief in one God. Polytheism is the belief in multiple different gods. So what was his point? His point was that if you grow up in a world where there is one God, whether you believe in it or not, it basically says there's one path, that there's right and there's wrong. When the Berlin Wall fell, a guy called Francis Fukuyama wrote a book saying the end of history. Liberal democracy has won. At the end of the Second World War, Hegel's theories came into prominence. You have a thesis and an antithesis, and it leads to a synthesis. In other words, we're right. Western democracy has beaten National Socialism. We're right. You're wrong. As Trotsky said, the victors write history. So if you live in a monotheistic world, you believe that you're right. At some deep level, whether you believe in God or not, it's got nothing to do with God. And as soon as you believe that liberal democracy, the West is right, Russia is wrong. China's wrong. What do you feel when you've been made to feel wrong? How does it feel? Well, many of us end up just, okay, I'm wrong. I'm feeling ashamed. I'll try harder. No, some of us, when we're made to feel wrong, we react. The worst day in Vladimir Putin's life was when the Berlin Wall collapsed and the Soviet Union collapsed, according to hearsay. Shame. So what's Ukraine about? I want my pride back. I want to prove I am good enough. I want to demonstrate and leave a legacy that people respect. What's Taurus about? Taurus about proving I'm right. We're great. We're amazing. We're the best country on the planet. What does polytheism say? There are 8 million gods in Japan. There's a god for a toilet, for heaven's sake, right? Like, everything is right and everything is wrong. Animism, there's a spirit for every mountain. So it's not right and wrong. It's, listen to the language. The language is vague. It flows. So they hold multiple different positions at one time. And yet, even in Japan, after the Second World War, they were made to feel wrong. They were occupied by American forces, liberal democracy. And now the political class is aligned with the states. China's wrong, Russia's wrong, liberal democracy is right. But underneath the underlying belief system is a belief system of polytheism. That all of us can be right and we can hold these multiple different perspectives. So all of these policies which are coming out are policies of trying to prove something. And they come from a very human individual. He's just human, right? Yes, he shows many of the vices of being human. He shows many of the values that we in Europe do not appreciate and do not value. But before we point the finger at someone else, let's ensure that we're not forgetting that there are 3 fingers pointing back at us. And when we point a finger and say, somebody is lying, somebody is bullying, somebody is misogynistic, somebody is destroying friendships and allies, let's look at ourselves and ask ourselves the question, have we ever lied? Have we ever manipulated? Have we ever bought into the idea that men are more powerful? Have we ever broken friendships and partnerships because it suited us and we know we did the wrong thing? So let's look at ourselves first before casting the stone and ask ourselves, what could we do differently? And what's really interesting, we're recording this just after, the Pope's death. What's really interesting, if you stand up to a bully with the light, it's been demonstrated again and again and again. You stand up to a bully with all the power of the ocean behind you, you will prevail. You know that wonderful scene in
The movie with
Lord of the
Tom
Rings?
Cruise. No?
Oh, okay, you're going to go Tom Cruise. I was going to go Gandalf.
Okay.
When he slams the staff down in front of the dragon and goes, "Ye shall not pass." Which one were you going with?
I was thinking you can't handle the truth.
You can't handle the truth. You can't handle the truth in A Few Good Men. Yeah, with
Nicholson.
Epperson.
And I'm also thinking of Mary Robinson, who always said, "You speak truth to power."
You speak truth to power. And that's what you see Mark Carney doing in Canada. It's what you're seeing Zelensky doing with Trump. It's what you see Macron doing. It's what you see to some extent, I think, Keir Starmer. He's finding his own feet in this one. And what Trump might be doing, might be starting to do with Putin, might. And who knows, by the time this comes out, maybe everything will have shifted. But I'm an eternal optimist. And even if that is a false dawn, the truth remains. Stand up to a bully consciously, and the bully will back down. Has to, because actually behind it is a facade.
I know that myself and I've seen it. And I also think that that voice is there within us. And we've spoken before about being silently complicit because a lot of us are because we're protecting ourselves and it's an absolute it's acceptable if that is the way that you are surviving. There comes a time though when all of us can uncover that voice within
Yes.
and speak our truth to power. And it's not, you're not shouting. It may even be in a very calm voice, but it's coming from that place inside that just knows. And we all have access to that.
The most powerful voice in the world is a quiet female voice that is so grounded and so centered that there is no need to shout, and beyond a shadow of doubt that there's nothing you can do to sway that individual. So you stop.
Which brings to mind Rosa Parks.
Correct. Yeah. Rosa Parks, Mother Teresa. There are so many incredible, quiet women, Mary Robinson, who stand for a truth, and we never recognize it. Housewives, mothers, grandmothers, and little by little they change the world just through small acts of pure love.
And as you were speaking, I kept thinking of the Rumi quote. There is a field beyond right doing and wrong doing, and I'll meet you there.
Yeah.
And that is where we need to get to, in a way,
Mm.
because this doing it right or this one way is causing havoc.
Well, if you look at this conversation, we're not getting there. We came from there. So the implication of I will meet you there is you need to get there. But if you listen to any master, they will tell you enlightenment is no further than the end of your nose. So if that's true, then we must already be there. We've just forgotten that we are in that field. And when you and I connect at this level, we're connecting in that field. If we could then act from there, we would go beyond the numbers. That is beyond the numbers, that field, that place to come from. I call it the summit of your mountain. It's the highest potential. If you ever go up mountains, you'll find that the frequency is higher. Your energy is higher at the top of the mountain than it is at the bottom of the mountain. Probably because we're not surrounded by the daily goings on and other people's energies and the challenges that we see on a daily basis, whether it be coming from the new administration or politics or war, or the threat of war, or the threat of recession, or whatever it is that's currently going on. Those are the things that distract us. Those are down in the valley. They keep us in the valley. But you go up a mountain, then you operate from the mountain, even when you come back down to the valley. That's truly mastery. It's what Richard Rudd refers to as everyday enlightenment.
The word that is just there is expansiveness.
Yes, yeah, you can feel that. It's a state. But when we're in our little mind, we're trying to strive to get to the field or get to the top of the mountain. But when we come from the top of the mountain, we come from the ocean, we come to the field, choose your analogy. There's a sense of freedom and expanse and openness and possibility. And from that space, there's nothing that can distract you. Now, of course, there'll be things that attempt to pull you out of that space, triggers. But over time, you can learn, teach yourself how to not be triggered by those things. And just like with the snow, painting in the blizzard, you embrace the resistance to the force that appears to be outside of you. So you come from the peak of the mountain. You embrace the resistance. You work out who you are here to serve, your audience. And you serve that audience, and that leads you to a state of inner knowing, i.e., back to the top of the mountain. So that's the peak blueprint. Peak, the path, E, embrace, A, audience, and K, knowing, inner knowing. That's how you come from the top of your mountain. Not just some of the time, all of the time. That's beyond the numbers. That's the field. And that's where souls meet before they come. So I will meet you there, future tense. No, I met you there, past tense, as far as our minds can understand how something outside of time works. Or I meet you there, present tense, because actually we're doing it constantly. Constantly we're meeting.
And now we are going to leave it there. Because our time is pretty much up, Alexander. And there was a lot in that conversation and so many threads that I didn't get to pull further on. And that's okay too. You've certainly left me with a lot of, well, a feeling of expansiveness to go into the rest of my day with, but also some new thinking. And that's one of the reasons I love these conversations on this podcast, because something sparks and maybe the shareholders of our country is something I'm going to keep with me for a while, because that's quite a powerful thought to hold. And there is a sense of responsibility that comes with it as well. And perhaps, like you and me and many people that might be listening, we're also not in the country that we were born in. And there's so much that goes around that too, that is for a whole other conversation. Alexander, if people would like to know more about you and what you do and how to connect with you, for example, what's the best way of getting in touch?
Well, what we'll do is we'll put a link to the next masterclass we're running in the show notes. And that's really about how do you create a movement brand. So we haven't talked about brands today at all, but my background is all in branding and marketing and communications, and bringing together this idea of the light, the peak blueprint, and helping you to implement the peak blueprint with your brand so that you grow it not just into a reflection of your inner light, but also you turn it into a movement that attracts other people to you. And that's what I've really been doing for the last, well, most of my life, I guess, is helping brands to grow. So if that resonates, then come along and join us for that masterclass. You'll learn how to implement that blueprint for your life, how to come from the top of your mountain, and not just how to grow your brand, but also how to have impact, how that will impact your relationships, so that you experience more intimacy, how it impacts your health, and how it impacts your family and communities. So that's probably the best way to get hold of me. We'll also add a couple of links to websites and things like that, and my book, if you ever wanted to read Masterpiece, which was a bestseller a few years ago. So that's probably the three things to look at. But if you really want to do something, not just think about it, then come along to the masterclass, sign up, and learn how to implement this for yourself.
Alexander, thank you so much for journeying through that hour with me today in so many different ways.
My pleasure. Thank you so much for hosting this, Susan, and holding the space, and delighted to be here and honored to see how much your masterpieces come to life since we last talked.
Thank you for joining me today on Life Beyond the Numbers. If something in this episode resonated with you, I'd love to hear your thoughts. And if you've enjoyed this conversation, please take a moment to leave a review. It helps others like us discover this podcast and join in our conversation. Until next time, keep exploring the human side of work life.